Is there anything more hilariously wonderful but an entire schoolyard laughing at a bully? Let me introduce you to the Canadian European schoolyard laughing at the orange idiot bully. It feels as if the convicted felon Trump is putting tariffs on nearly every element in existence. The orange idiot's desire for turning the entire world into an economic disaster matches his chaotic way of running the United States perfectly, and is only surpassed by his incapability to get any sensible deal done. Experts are clear. Trump's record-high tariffs are a recipe for economic suicide. In response to Trump creating chaos, Mark Carney is quietly securing new deals. Canada's ambitions remain crystal clear. The most open, free and fair trade possible and zero tariffs. But with Trump's torched earth attitude, Canada needs to protect what matters. Its industries are the backbone of entire provinces like British Columbia, New Brunswick and Nova Scotia. Every new tariff leads to job losses, shut down plants and families left wondering what's next. And what does all Trump's stupid rhetoric about Canada's the 51st state and Greenland annexation combined with economic uncertainty and travel restriction mean for Canada and the European Union? Well, I don't think as long as convict, sexual abuser and serial bankrupter Trump is in the White House, we will go back to anything remotely like free trade agreements we came to enjoy since the mid-1990s. It was not perfect, but it worked. And now they are gone forever. As a proud Canadian and European, I think the order of the day for Canada, as well as for the EU, is in the short run to fight back, protect the well-being of our citizens and the sovereignty of our country or union. And in the long run, we have to find new trade alliances, sources, providers and buyers. Speaking of fighting back, let me show you what everyday Canadians are doing, how we effectively giving the Canadian middle finger to the White House. Lots of us Canadians are committed to choose Canada right now instead of America. Not only is it the right thing to do, but it's also the only thing that makes any sense. Think about it. Why would you want to help out the economy of a country that is being openly hostile to yours, like the US is right now to Canada? Why would you buy an American car, American stuff in your grocery store, or even take your vacation dollars to the US, where record high inflation powered by Trump tariffs drive costs of living through the roof? Besides making no economic sense, your action would mean that you thank criminal Trump for his tariffs while giving your own country the cold shoulder. Honestly, I'd rather keep my hard-earned money right here at home in beautiful British Columbia, Canada, or in Europe, what I frequently do. But there's also another element to the disaster administration, aka Trump administration. I think Canadians as well as West and Middle Europeans do not accept human rights violations. However, the disaster administration and in association the entire MAGA cult is based on human rights violations, even flat out human rights denial, such as denying the right to bodily autonomy, due process, a fair trial, right of assembly, law for law enforcement, access to health insurance, and affordable living are all human rights violations and running rampant in the US right now. The orange idiot's latest genius grift is his new visa integrity fee. Hang on, what? What a joke. Trump and integrity? The new $200 fee applies to everyone who needs a non-immigration visa, which includes tourists, business travelers, and international students. And keep in mind, the fee cannot be waived. Most Canadian citizens are exempt due to our visa-free travel privileges. However, the fee does apply to everyone who has a permanent and temporary residence to Canada. But the most despicable part of this latest Trump grift is that this fee is used for additional ICE funding. You know, ICE, the agency where masked and unidentifiable so-called agents make people disappear with no due process, no warrants, where nothing they do is based on law enforcement procedures. Now keep in mind that generally speaking, every dollar going towards the US supports the disaster administration and its disregard for human rights. But the good news is that all of us, people in Canada and Europe, in example like France, Spain, Germany, and the UK, just to name a few, have absolute superpower. Take a look at this.
United States.
I think Canada is going to be a very serious contender to be our 51st state.
That sparked a boycott of U.S. goods. Boycotts often wane over time, but the Buy Canadian movement remains strong. Many Canadians also continue to avoid U.S. travel. The number of times Canadians visited the U.S. in June compared to last year declined by 22% for air travel and by 33% for land travel.
U.S. wine exports to Canada plunged in April. They were down more than 90%. And of course, a lot of that is to do with provinces responding to U.S. President Donald Trump's tariffs and blocking imports of U.S. booze.
The exports of U.S. wine to Canada are virtually down to zero, or they're closing in on zero. So it was 93% May 25 over May 24. And that accounts, like the exports to Canada account for more than a third of all U.S. exports by value, and that is massive.
In response to U.S. tariffs and President Trump's threats to annex Canada, 71% of Canadian consumers say they intend to buy fewer American products this year. That's having an impact. The U.S. economy could lose up to 0.3% of its GDP, or about $90 billion in 2025, due to the boycott of American goods and the decline in foreign tourism.
We had Canada flags everywhere in the store.
Tremarky says since then, his customers have moved decisively away from U.S. products.
At the height of when we are out of Canada's growing season, we could be upwards of 60%, 70% American produce, okay? Right now, we're only running at about 30%.
Canadian flags and labels mark domestic goods in aisles, while apps like MapleScan help shoppers identify origin.
You take a photo of a product, the app will scan what that product is, figure out what it is, the label, look up information online about it, essentially compile all that information together into a product page to kind of give you information about like the company's history, who it's been owned by in the past versus now, what are its Canadian ties.
Vince's Market, a Canadian grocery store chain with 4 locations. He's seen the backlash firsthand.
Talk to me a bit about how the Buy Canada movement has affected you at the grocery store.
Our customers are demanding from us as much Canadian product as possible. They're getting frustrated and upset when they see too much U.S. product.
We've obviously seen the very visible and visceral reaction from markets to U.S. policies, but it's very interesting to see from the consumer side what impact it's having. And these little acts of activism from consumers who have decided to turn their back on certain U.S. products.
If there was a Canadian version and an American version, we probably already delisted the American version and supported the Canadian product because that's what our customers are looking for.
They went ahead and they added Made in Canada labels permanently onto the bags.
American staples like wine, beer, and spirits have seen the biggest change being wiped off Canadian shelves. Earlier this year, multiple Canadian provinces announced they were pulling American alcohol from their store shelves. And in March, Canada imposed a 25% tariff on all U.S. alcohol products. A 25% tariff on distilled spirit imports from Mexico and Canada could cost more than 31,000 U.S. jobs.
So we're in our wine section now. Our wine business, roughly 35-40% of our red wine sales is California cabs and blends. So that's $60,000 a week in sales that are just gone. They've evaporated from the United States. We're replacing it, and we're replacing it with import wines from France, from South Africa, from Australia, from New Zealand.
In 2024, Canada was the U.S.'s top export market for alcohol, exporting $435 million worth of wine, $221 million in distilled spirits, and $41 million in beer to Canada. The loss to the U.S. is a boon to Canada, with the Buy Canada movement adding roughly $10 billion to the country's economy. More Canadians visit the U.S. each year than from any other country. In 2024, 20 million Canadians visited the U.S., generating $20.5 billion in spending. But the flow is slowing. Online travel searches from Canada to the U.S. dropped 50% this spring.
If you look at Canadian drive traffic, it was down nearly 30% in March. Air travel, not as bad. Combined, it was down about 15%.
And you hear it anecdotally, either Canadians staying in Canada for vacation or going to somewhere else like Europe.
Businesses along the northern U.S. border report plunging revenues, vanishing foot traffic, and uncertainty over survival.
When you look at that border traffic, as you said, Michigan, obviously with Windsor and Detroit right there. When you look at New York State, Buffalo, they've taken the brunt of that fall in Canadian travel.
And it's not just Canada. Across the Atlantic, travel to the U.S. from Europe is also dropping.
Sort of early indications from Europe that might be the case too. A core saying that bookings from Europe to the US are down 25% over the summer period.
The pullback is costly. The U.S. is on track to lose $12.5 billion in international visitor spending this year compared with 2024. It's part of a sharp reversal over the past decade, but tensions tied to trade and immigration are making it worse.
It's about $200 billion that these international travelers spend. That's bigger than all of our agricultural exports combined. We need these travelers here, obviously, from a job standpoint, a spending standpoint. When these travelers come, they do nothing more than come, spend their money, and go home and tell their friends and family to do the same thing. It's free money.
The boycotts that began in Canada have spread. European consumers frustrated with American foreign policy are rejecting U.S. companies as well. And anger over Trump's comments about annexing Greenland led 44% of European consumers to say they're shifting away from U.S. products, no matter what happens with trade negotiations.
Tesla, McDonald's, these being front of mind, some of these really big household U.S. names that they've just been rejected by some consumers in Europe.
Tesla has seen the brunt of the boycotts. Its European car sales have tanked for the 5th straight month in May, with sales plunging almost 28% from brand damage, increased competition, and the political views of CEO Elon Musk.
British Columbians are slashing their spending in the U.S. Van Cities crunch the numbers, and the results are staggering.
Canadians, by and large, avoiding spending on U.S. vacations.
Everything from the day trips to buying less groceries across into Washington State, or going to do a weekend trip to Seattle, or just their family holidays they're not doing anymore.
The numbers go deeper. Spending is down 47% in Washington State. In the U.S. as a whole, it's down 1/3. Online shopping at U.S. retailers has dropped by 14%, with the biggest drop in clothing purchases.
What's really interesting from our perspective is this is really hard dollars data. Our members, we have almost 600,000 of them, are spending significantly less in the U.S. A year-over-year change of that magnitude is would have been unthinkable a year ago.
Experts say the downturn matches the drop in cross-border traffic. Crossings into Whatcom County are down roughly 40%. The holdback of Canadian customers is having an impact on businesses along the I-5 corridor. What's unusual about this downturn is how sharp the decline was and how consistent Canadians have been with their preferences to spend elsewhere.
Airlines rolled out its winter schedule this morning, adding 5 new destinations for sun seekers. none of them in the United States. Travel to the United States has fallen sharply this year.
We have seen some decline in demand to the U.S., and as a result, we've redeployed some of our capacity into domestic markets across the Atlantic and into Latin Caribbean destinations. We've seen that demand situation stabilize, but it's hard to say how it's going to develop going forward. But we have a lot of confidence in the destinations that we're offering today.
Adds Panama City, Panama, Guadalajara and Tepic in Mexico, Havana, Cuba, and Managua, Nicaragua to the company's list of destinations. The airline has also bumped up its Mexico City service to a year-round schedule. It is also adding 7 new routes, including direct flights from Calgary to both Cozumel, Mexico, and Puerto Plata in the Dominican Republic. The new Latin American and Caribbean offerings come at the same time travel to the United States has fallen sharply this year.
And how do you fight against Trump's oppressive regime? Do you avoid American companies and products traveling to the US? Please let us know in the comments below. It helps to inspire others. And then there is this new and exciting alliance between Canada, under the leadership of our new and very capable Prime Minister Mark Carney, and the European Union.
With you, Mr. President, I want to ensure that France and the whole of Europe works enthusiastically with Canada, the most European of non-European countries.
Now we're working alongside the European Union to combat climate change, to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals, and to protect, amongst other things, academic and scientific freedoms. In these ways, the world knows the strength of our values. And this partnership, which is in defense and security and economics, really builds those strengths in both our jurisdictions and lives up to our values. So with that, thank you for the partnership.
Now Canada has signed a new deal aimed at bringing Canada and Europe even closer.
As the saying goes, hard times reveal true friends.
Today, this is a new era of cooperation, and this will make us both more resilient and more prosperous.
The pact seeks to make it easier and more affordable to buy weapons and ammunition.
And as we build up those resources, we can do those in a way that's complementary and mutually reinforcing.
Carney knows that certainty builds confidence. Entrepreneurs, investors, workers, they all need a stable foundation, not policies shifting on a whim. Carney's drive for a tariff-free agreement is not a lofty dream, but rooted in day-to-day survival of working Canadians, a situation mirrored in most European countries as well. Canada and the EU want stability and not changing situation every time Washington has a mood swing. With tariffs against Canada jacked up to 50%, traditional access to the US market is all but shut. And at the same time, the EU is threatened with staggering 30% tariffs. That means that they now have to figure out how to balance and adjust individual portions of each European country that has to carry to make up for the altogether 30% tariffs on the EU. It is fucking ridiculous. For both parts, Canada and the United Nations, the only way forward is outward. Reinforcing industries, incentivize innovations, strengthen supplier chains, and keeping foreign rivals at bay. While Trump tries to isolate Canada, Carney is building new alliances in Europe, Asia, and Latin America for the benefit of all countries involved. Carney does not want Canadian cities at the mercy of Washington's next move. He wants them empowered and future ready, a goal Mark Carney shares with the EU. As it happened so often in history when something good comes out of something bad, Canada transformed Trump's tariffs offensive into a springboard for its own global expansion. By prioritizing calm and certainty, While Washington spreads uncertainty, Prime Minister Mark Carney's government drew billions in fresh investments and formed robust new trade ties spanning continents, most noticeably with the European Union. Good things ahead. And thanks for watching. See you next time, here on Europe Curious.